Thank you for that reading, William. I don't know why the line struck me. God provides grass for the cattle. Way back then. Cattle, grass, same thing. Not much changes, just really struck me. So I feel like I have sort of homiletical whiplash. That is to say, I've been focused on the book of Exodus and the Gospel of John for months now. Finished it on Easter Sunday, and now I'm in the Gospel of Luke. What's that about? We're focused on the next 3 weeks on miracles in the Gospel of Luke, 3 of them. The initial intent was in the middle of that series to have the Reality of Healing conference, and there was a healing miracle to be talked about that day, but the organizers of the conference have decided they will postpone it until next year, and I'm not going to save the sermon that long. So we will indeed look at these 3 miracle stories over a period of 3 weeks, 3 sermons. Now they raise issues for the modern mind, right? Miracle stories do. In this case, it's a nature miracle. We don't really think it's possible that these things happened. So they raise issues for us that simply were not issues for the people that wrote the story. I mean, they lived in a world where the wind and the waves were demons. It was a spiritual world that was conjured up. And so they understood the power of Christ to be a spiritual power that interacted with those things. Now, the question is, did they happen in this way, these miracles, one of which I'll read? And I kind of go to my rabbi friend Avram Davis and say, well, answer to all theological questions is, could be. I kind of doubt it. And I'm not sure I'd want to look at the text that way right now, because this is the stuff of archetypes and dreams. This is the kind of passage that opens up the heart and asks our imagination to play. Helps us to understand how to see our own life in the context of the story. So with that, will you listen as the Spirit brings the Word of God to your imaginative heart? One day, Jesus got into a boat. He got into that boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let's go across to the other side of the lake. So they put out, and while they were sailing, Jesus fell asleep. A windstorm swept down upon the lake, and the boat was filling up with water, and they were in danger. So the disciples went to Jesus, and they woke him up, and they shouted, Master, Master, we are perishing. And he woke up, rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased. And there was calm. And Jesus said to them, where is your faith? They were afraid. They were amazed. And they said to one another, who then is this that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? So at the end of a long Lenten season, longer in many ways, I think, for William than for me, what, 45 rehearsals, 7 services in a week? I don't know. It did seem to go on for a while, and it occurred to me that William needed some kind of a little reward, and I happened to have an extra ticket to a mandolin concert on Easter evening at the Herbst Theater. And so William and I went off to Herbst Theater last week, 7 o'clock at night, and listened to Chris Thiele. Now, Chris sings a beautiful song about a lighthouse. I am a lighthouse, and it's a song about the sea and about the lighthouse's keeper and the keeper's lover who went to sea and was lost at sea. And it's this wonderful epic dream. And that's kind of like this story. You know, the same way with that story in Acts about the Apostle Paul when he was imprisoned and they were in the middle of the Mediterranean and a northwesterly wind blew down upon him and they were in danger. It's kind of like Jonah and that big fish, which, by the way, was not a whale, it was a fish, a big fish. And these are, as I said, the stuff of dreams. They have to do with confronting the challenges and the difficulties we meet in life. They have to do with traveling from a place where we have felt safe perhaps and stayed and secure to a place that's generative and new but requires some little difficulty to get there. And so it is that Jesus calls them to move into the water, to move into the lake that they may get to the other side of this challenge. You know the challenges of life. For some of us, it's a diagnosis that comes, that shakes us at the roots of our being and asks us to ponder the questions of life and death at a time when we weren't prepared to do so. For others, it is in the aging we begin to get a sense that there is a something else, another side. For some, it's raising children, children who can be counted upon to make the wrong decisions in life. Barbara and I have a friend whose son was caught breaking into a store and went to see this woman, and she said to me, "He's trying to kill me." It's a trial. It's as though she's in the boat and she's taken on water. The mom trying to love her son and get him into the future somehow. It's true for the church too, I'm afraid, that we are facing a kind of challenge, and I don't mean just this church. So this week, we hear that the bishop of the Episcopalian Church in America has decided that they won't accept any more postulants. No more postulants, no more people to start becoming priests because they do not have enough jobs for new priests. I happen to be a member of the Committee on Preparation for Ministry in our presbytery, Redwoods Presbytery. And we decided 2 or 3 months ago that it was incumbent upon us, whenever a new candidate came to us, somebody who was interested in serving in gospel ministry, whenever somebody came, we needed to tell them the truth, that it was unlikely that they would have a full-time job in ministry when they got through all of their preparation. That tent making, that is to say, a dual career kind of ministry, is the norm, not the exception to the rule. The church is in troubled times. This church has its own kind of challenges. You know, attendance from January to Easter this year is down 19% over January to Easter last year. It's as though we're in a boat, we're taking on water, trying to get to the other side. Now, let me hasten to say that I have written a letter recently to the session that tries to outline some of the issues for our church, and I am not saying in this sermon that one can only follow Jesus by doing what Sam says about the future of the church. Tempting though it is. No. It's really not what I'm saying, because people can differ about the strategies that we would use to address the challenges that confront us. People can differ about the strategies that we use in the treatment of diseases in the midst of a crisis and difficulty. People can differ about the way in which we handle the raising of our children who are troubled. No, I'm not saying that it's all about my way, but I am talking about a boat that's going across a sea that seems to be taking on water. Of course, water in the scriptures is is that raw material, that stuff of what's new. You reach into the water and you pull out the fish, the essential spiritual truth. It's what the symbol stands for. And so it is that we are called to move onto the boat, to follow Jesus into the water, and to deal with the crisis, with the crises in front of us. Get into the boat, he says. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't get into the boat when they face the difficulties and the challenges of life. They wait on the shore, they anesthetize themselves, they turn their head away, and try and deny the idea that we have a crisis in life, that there is a disease, that we are aging, that there are difficulties in our society that mean our children get caught up in things that they would not be caught up in if they were just in our homes. People don't get into the boat, and yet that's exactly what disciples do. Because this text in Luke is all about Jesus developing disciples. The Gospel of Luke, the entire plot of it, is about the Spirit of God moving from Nazareth to Jerusalem. It's about the Spirit moving in such a way that it takes over that which is the status quo, the power of Rome that has shut things down, and gives freedom to people and allows people to see that next on the other side. And Jesus is training disciples, because soon he will choose more disciples. He'll send first 12 and then 70, as though a militaristic campaign almost, to take over the city of Jerusalem for the presence of a gracious and loving God. That's how it's framed up here. In those moments, we are called to confront. We are called to get onto the boat and deal with it. But we take on water, and we get afraid, don't we? Consider the challenges that you've faced in your life or are facing. We get afraid. I'm scared to death about the attendance in the church. It affects how I look at things. It affects how I deal with people. Sometimes I'm pleased with how I handle that, and sometimes I'm truly disappointed in how I handle that. How about you? All the ways in which you handle yourself when the water comes on to your boat, when you feel like things are sinking. Well, in our story, of course, the disciples cry out and they wake Jesus up, as though to wake up the power in the boat necessary to carry them to the other side. And Jesus rebukes the wind and the waves. Well, that's nice and all, but where's Jesus for me? I mean, really. And that's the problem with this miracle story. You see, we have to wonder, well, where is that power going to operate in my life? Because I'll tell you, it doesn't always work. I mean, a couple of decades ago, I was camping in the northern Adirondacks, and I was all by myself, and I got a canoe, and I was going to be away from it all for about 10 days. And as I'm coming out to this island, I mean, there was a storm came up, and I really wondered whether I was going to make it to that island. And I started saying, cut it out, stop with the wind and the waves. Didn't work. I did, however, make it. That's the trouble with thinking about this story as miracles that we're expecting someone else to do. Somehow that there's this magical power that comes from the outside that fixes things as we're taking on water, but that's not really the point of this epic story, this dream, this archetypical thought. No, because for one thing, we're really not supposed to see Jesus as essentially anything different than us. I made fun of Jesus, Superman, last week on Easter Sunday. You know, the Superman who comes to powers and comes to earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. But you know, one of the most foundational theological statements in the Christian tradition, and that means before we ever split at all, was that Jesus Christ is fully God and fully human. It's what defined Christian when we finally got around to settling into church. Fully God and fully human. Doesn't mean half God and half human. Doesn't mean some of the things Jesus did were God things and other things were human things. What it means, actually, is that if, could be, Jesus spoke and the wind and the waves were calm, then apparently that's something that you and I can do. But let's take it out of the miraculous and put it into the real. Because what this teacher is teaching us is about something within ourselves. At the moment when we're taking on water, the water that can both drown us and give us new life, at that moment, Jesus says, "Where is your faith?" Now, so often we read that text to mean, what's the matter with you? Where's your faith? What's going on? But I don't read it that way. It's, where is your faith? Can you identify where your faith is at this moment, is what Jesus wants to know. He is training disciples for the journey. And at the moment when you take on the water, he's asking the disciple to reflect, where is the faith? Asking the disciple to get to that place where you're disconnected enough that your emotions do not overwhelm your judgment. Get to that place where you can recognize that no matter the outcome, the presence of God and the strength of God's love will carry you to an other side. Will it be an other side that you expect or want? Probably not. That's the way creation is. The new, the novel, the next step in creation is usually quite a surprise. And so, where is your faith is that place in our hearts that lets go and is no longer acting out of that scared and fearful place. This is a text for disciples. Disciples who are called to get into the boat in the midst of crisis. As a church falters, as health falters, as we confront the end of life, as we raise children who make really bad decisions. As we get into that boat, we find that place where we recognize that God's power will bring something novel, beautiful, and new out of whatever comes. That's the peace, you see, that passes all understanding, Paul says, the peace that makes no sense whatsoever when you're taking on water. Many people don't get into the boat. And so it means they don't grow. In some ways, they don't really live. You and I, committed to being disciples of the Christ, the pattern, the love of all creation, we need to be in the boat, opening our hearts to reality, looking for our faith, that place where we can come at peace, because we know it's not all about this I, but rather all about the I am. When we get to that place, we can smile and say, where's my faith? It's right here. Where's the power of creation? It's right here. And the wind and the waves that surround our life will in fact become still.